licensed under CC license. We think like film festival, filmmakers here, like it will be good if we tell them like more about the license, how we can use CC videos when they're like films, movies, and how to license their content. This workshop will give you like introduction to the Creative Commons and the license we have, and like how to remix videos. First we will start with Mohamed Nanabhay. He is the head of online on Al Jazeera English. He will give you like introduction, like how Al Jazeera license some contents on CC and about it.
Thank you, Mohamed. Good morning. So just before we talk about what Al Jazeera has done, I want to start with a word. This word is contamination. And when we talk about contamination, the association we normally get is about something bad, something being, something that was pure and now it's been contaminated and is changing its form negatively. But in fact, contamination, the way we understand it in the media sense, as Al Jazeera, especially talking about Creative Commons, contamination is not a bad thing. It's something quite positive. And so I use the word contamination in the same sense that the Princeton philosopher Kwame Appiah used it. He talks about culture and contamination. And he talks about how cultures are not something that are stagnant. Cultures aren't static. Cultures are continually being made and remade all the time as we interact. And this film festival is an example of this sort of contamination that Appiah will talk about. How our identities are formed and reconstituted continually based on our experiences. So the mere fact that we've come here from around the world to watch films, to watch movies, to understand and look at the experiences of people from across the world, we are, in a sense, contaminating our ideas. When we leave this festival, we've now gained an understanding of other parts of the world. Those now infused with our understanding of the world. We now understand the world slightly differently, perhaps slightly better. We have a better understanding of places and people who we may not have had before. So this form of cultural contamination is something that's quite important to the way we constitute our identities. And in the same way, media provides a very similar method of contamination. But when we look at it and you look at it online, and people talk about contamination, no one uses the word contamination. This is a word that philosophers would use. But we talk about remixing. Right? So this is what we talk about when we look at it online. How do we remix our media? How do we build media based on media that's been developed by others? Media that's been conceptualized by others. So this is very important when we start to say, as people working in the media, what's our goal? Our goal is to create understanding. Our goal when we produce media, when we produce content, is to allow our audience to have a better understanding of this world. To have a better understanding of people across this world, understanding of their cultures, their identities, how those identities are constituted, how they are reconstituted. And by the very notion when our audience sits and watches our content and watches what we produce, their identities are being reconstituted and reconstituted just by taking this in and by watching this, understanding what the filmmaker has been saying. And the next step after that is, how do we then enable more filmmakers and other content producers in this culture that we have today where media is being produced 24/7, where we're continually consuming and remixing and recreating content. How do we enable this? How do we enable people not just to be passive consumers, but how do we enable them to be part of the media production process? How do we enable this contamination to take place? So what we have done at Al Jazeera when looking at this problem, we looked very hard at it and we looked at the copyright problem that we have today. So, in the world we've got these stringent copyright laws, and in one way these laws are very much against this idea of contamination. They're very much there to promote purity of content, but not for the sake of purity, not because it's somehow ideological. Rather, in order to maintain, business interests for people who may make money out of this content. So it's very much angled from a business monetary perspective rather than from a cultural perspective. Because we know, especially if you're based in this region and many other regions around the world, that culture has been passed down orally in our traditions through poetry, through the written word. And this was always passed down without constraints. People would take it and they would build on it. They would read, they would use it, and then they would keep on using it and you'd create something new. And this is how all culture, all knowledge is produced. Nothing is ever produced in isolation. Nothing is produced that you've done individually and uniquely. Everything's been built upon some work that had been done previously by somebody else, by some idea that somebody else has had. Whether it's philosophical work, whether it's scientific work, or whether it's media. So, one way of looking at this problem for us was, how do we then take this material that we produced as Al Jazeera, hours and hours of footage of text, and how do we say to our audience out there, how do we say to the next generation of filmmakers that we produced all of this, but we want to enable you to use it. We don't want to criminalize you, right? So, because of the copyright regime that we have, we're criminalizing the next generation. Our children are becoming criminals by default. Just not because they're trying to do something criminal, not because they're trying to do something evil, but just because of the way they consume media on the internet. We effectively criminalize the whole generation, which is a huge problem for us. As we grow up, we're going to grow up with children who understand right and wrong slightly differently from the way we would. Just because we've entered a new age online, in a new age where media moves around the planet at instantaneous speeds, where everything's simultaneous. You don't need to wait to consume it and to build upon it. So we looked at Creative Commons, and what Creative Commons did was basically said, well, we have this copyright infrastructure. So on the one hand, you have people pirating the media, pirating content, which is bad and illegal, and it's not good for the content producers, it's not good for the audience, it's not good for anybody. On the other hand, we have these strict copyright laws, where we're stifling our culture, stifling innovation. So there needs to be some middle point. And what Creative Commons did was say, based on the existing laws that we have, based on the existing copyright regimes across the world, based on the existing conventions, why don't we ask content producers to say, well, not all rights are reserved, but some rights are reserved. And by doing that, what we are saying is, we acknowledge that content has been produced by somebody, but maybe those content producers don't want to keep all those rights. Maybe they want to enable others to build upon their content. Maybe they want this culture to flourish. Perhaps they want somebody else to take off from an idea that they might have developed and to take it further, to enrich it, to enhance it, to build upon it. Because this, historically, is how we produce culture. So Creative Commons said, let's build a licensing regime based upon the existing license to... Is that for me? No. Okay, so we're saying, how do we do that? How do we come to some middle point where we can enable this within a legal framework? So when we approached this as Al Jazeera, we looked at the Creative Commons license, and what Creative Commons offered us was a way to enable our audience, to enable documentary filmmakers, to enable universities, students, other broadcasters to be able to take our content and use it legally. So it's very much an idea that was born within the current legal definition. And we had some really interesting results based on this. So what the license does is quite easy. Instead of other broadcasters or filmmakers coming to us trying to negotiate a long legal contract with us, it costs a ton of money because it's going back and forth between lawyers, and no real value being created by this transaction. The transaction is so small because somebody wants half an hour of footage, a minute of footage, whatever that might be, but you're spending this high amount of transaction costs between lawyers, negotiating, contracting, and so on. So what Creative Commons does is says, well, look, you can use this, and we give you this license. And all you need to do is maintain the terms of this license when you use it. And as long as you're within these boundaries that we've laid out and predefined, go ahead and use it. And I think my colleague previously walked me through some of these licenses in detail. So what we did was, in 2009, we launched our Creative Commons repository. And we made a whole lot of material available under Creative Commons license. And we continually add to that repository. And this footage is meant to be used, well, when we started this, right, so this is quite interesting. We thought that it would be used by other broadcasters, it would be used by documentary filmmakers who would come and make historical documentaries or current affairs documentaries. And what we found was that there were a whole different group of people who went and used this content. And it was surprising and shocking, but inspiring in a way, that there was this new generation of content producers that only exist because we exist in this online culture where the ease of producing material, the ease of distributing material has almost fallen to zero. So this project started, the idea when the war in Gaza happened. We were the only English language broadcaster international broadcaster within Gaza. So we had access to footage that nobody else had at the time. We were the only people in English beaming out this content. No other broadcasters has access to it. So other broadcasters, other news organizations were all relying on us to provide the material, to provide the footage. So during this process, we decided, we've been in discussions with Creative Commons for a long time to launch some sort of repository and do a project. We thought this would be a great part to start with, because people want this footage. We're the only people who have it, so it's quite valuable footage. So instead of starting and saying we'll make some low-value footage available, we said let's make some high-value footage available. Footage that people want to use, and people are asking us on a daily basis for access to. So we took this footage from Gaza and we made it available online. So there's two important parts. It's not just making this footage available, because on the internet you'll find, hours and hours and hours of content being generated every minute, right? But this was very high quality footage. It was footage that we had because we as Al Jazeera were in the right place at the right time, because we've always seen these areas as important. So while other news organizations may not have been there, we were there, and we've been there for years. So we made this footage available under this repository, and we keep on adding footage to it. So we've got footage from Gaza, Iran, Lebanon, Taiwan, and continually gets updated. So what you can do as a content maker is go onto this website, preview the footage, and if you like something, download it. And you'll download high definition broadcast quality footage. So we were the first broadcaster in the world to actually make this sort of footage at this quality available for free online. And what was important about the license was we were saying to other broadcasters or anybody else that all you need to do is attribute it to us. So when you use this footage, we're not going to ask for money, we're not going to ask for anything else. All we need you to do is say this footage was produced by Al Jazeera, and then do what you want with it. So it's a very easy to understand license, very flexible. People can come and use it, they can remix it, rebroadcast it, build upon it. So immediately the first place this footage was used was in Wikipedia, and this was used within hours of us putting the footage online. So when we conceptualized the project, we had no idea. We didn't even think about Wikipedia. We didn't think, we thought it was documentary filmmakers, broadcasters. And suddenly Wikipedia, within hours of this going up, Wikipedia editors had seen the footage, they grabbed it, and they've used it in the articles on the wall to enhance the Wikipedia article. And for me this was quite satisfying, because if Wikipedia is an encyclopedia that we've produced as humanity together, right? Eventually it's people who produce this. It's just you and me and everybody else who are building this huge encyclopedia, this pool of knowledge out there. And now we've enabled that. So, for time immemorial, this content will now be added to this. It's sort of our collective consciousness that we produced. So Wikipedia used it. It was then used by filmmakers. It was used in music videos. Artists had used it. It was used in video games. Teachers in schools and universities had used it. Activists. It was used in public service announcements. It was also used, for commercial needs. So, part of this is always, this is sort of a free culture project. But what happens commercially? This is sort of a question that other broadcasters ask us. But this is not a project, it's not one or the other. We believe that you can contribute back and contribute, back to the commons and, to the common good while still being able to be profitable with it. And what this did was, because we put up all this footage, we had filmmakers and broadcasters coming to us and seeing this and saying, I like that, but we want this and this and this that you don't have available. Could you send it to us? So it generated commercial needs as well. So that's quite a successful model as well. So being able to do some sort of hybrid licensing model. So the reasons why we did it, and I'll run through this very quickly, like how is that? So, its reputation, one, Al Jazeera was really seen as being on the cutting edge of the free culture movement. We really understood the copyright issue of the day. In fact, subsequent to us doing this, Barack Obama's White House licensed their website under Creative Commons. I don't think because of us, but we did it before them, and they then went on to do it. So they were the sort of second big use case that Creative Commons had. The White House decided that they should be publishing material that they produce under the same license. And a number of other people that then subsequently went on to do it as well. So there's quite a few big organizations, big use cases for this. It increased our distribution. At the time, we were really looking, and we still are looking to push distribution in many countries, such as the United States, India, and so on. And this was a means of making our content available to people in those countries and other countries. We had broadcasters from Europe who took the footage and used it as well. This financial, I spoke about that. It empowers the community. At the end, as a media organization, we don't work in a vacuum. We don't work just as Al Jazeera and as no one else. There's a community of content creators out there. And we want to help them, especially in this part of the world or the rest of the developing world, to be able to have access to high quality content, so people can make documentaries, so people can use them for projects, becomes quite valuable. And this is the way we help train a new generation of video, of documentary filmmakers and so on. Part of it is respect for our audience. We create this content, again, not in a vacuum. We created this part of this audience, and now as we move towards the space of media, where everything's interactive, we constitute and reconstitute the media, it's not just about us telling them, but it's about them telling us a story as well. And by using our content, they can tell the story themselves. And it's a challenge to our competitors. It's a challenge to everyone here as well to say, we can do this is possible. It's possible to build upon the existing copyright regime and to do it in a way that doesn't, sort of shut down the culture that we're trying to promote, doesn't sort of shut down the creativity and innovation that should be happening in the space. So this is a bit about the project that we've had and a bit about Creative Commons. Thank you.